Welcome to In the Flow, where we dive into how marketing leaders use operations to cut through the chaos and seize opportunity. Joining me today is Mike Rizzo, someone who's been at the heart of marketing ops movement for years. On the back of this experience, Mike founded marketingops.com, one of the biggest and best communities out there for, you guessed it, marketing ops professionals. If you're not a member, definitely join today. Mike, awesome to have you here. Welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. What's in a name, right? It's pretty straightforward. Marketingops.com. It's a place you can go to find marketing ops people. Although I do get asked often, "Oh, are you do you provide services? Are you an agency?" And I'm like, "Oh, I could. Okay, fair. I could see
Oh,
why
that
they
makes
might
sense.
think
Yeah.
that."
Have you ever thought about providing services? Because it's a pretty big community. How many members do you have now?
We have 6,500 members in Slack today,
Wow.
and north of about, I don't know, 15,000 or so overall like subscribers that are sort of paying attention to the podcast and the newsletter and research and that kind of stuff.
That's
So yeah.
brilliant. We can talk about your background and intro and all that, but just tell me how did you come up with the idea to start with this community? Obviously, your background's in events, communities, but how specifically marketingops.com and that community?
The context is helpful, so I'll give you the short sort of background story, and then it kind of lends itself to why marketingops.com exists today. And during college, actually, I'm gonna take you way back.
Great.
When I
Let's
was
start with your childhood.
yeah, like when I was about I want to say 7 years old, I knew I wanted to be in marketing.
Okay.
But I thought it was a very different kind of marketing. In fact, I thought I was a creative marketer. And the reason is I had an idea for a Pepsi commercial. And at the time, it was like James Bond, 007, popular video game. My dad worked for Pepsi, and I just had this vision of like him doing his famous like turn and shoot, and the Pepsi like pours out of a can or something, right? Like that was my 7 year
Okay.
old, like that would be so cool. And fast forward, I found out that I'm not quite that kind of marketer, but I did fall in love with business. I always knew I wanted to sort of figure out how to just be on the business ops, biz ops like side of things. And technology obviously has been rapidly evolving throughout the years. And in college, I got a start at a company called Specific Media. They're now known as Viant. My role was ad trafficker. Sort of the long and short of it is I learned a bit about HTML because I was in ad trafficking. And I was like, hey, this isn't so scary. Let me figure out how to build emails and websites. And then I was asked to come to what is now known as a SaaS company. And they were like, help us send a newsletter. And from then on, I ended up in this role of, wow, inbound was growing. It was a brand new movement. HubSpot was an up and comer on the scene. Marketo was there. It was fascinating.
Just context. What sort of year was this, or what sort of
Yeah.
range?
So gosh, it would have been like 2005,
Okay. Yeah. So
2006
this was early
timeframe.
days of SaaS, still. Yeah.
Yeah. Still pretty early. The medical bill review company I worked for was still like on-prem software for the most part, but we were like moving to the cloud. Like the cloud movement was all the rage, right?
Yeah.
And so that was why it was like now known as a SaaS company. um, but yeah, ultimately I ended up implementing a couple of different sort of migrations for that organization because they were bootstrapping their way back to success. I took a role as a marketing operations manager at MavenLink, likely a company that some of your listeners are probably familiar with. It's now Cantata, and I was there twice. But my roles were first and foremost to be a marketing ops manager implementing technology, but then a field events sort of orchestration manager as well. So I was on the demand gen team, and that ultimately is what led me to start a thing on this tool called Slack in 2007. So it was not a well-known tool yet.
Yeah.
And I wrote a
No, it
Medium
wasn't. I mean,
post
it was all
about it.
Skype back then. So
Yeah. And
Skype and
so,
Yammer. I think Yammer
yeah,
was still. Yeah, Yammer was a thing.
Yammer, and then there was HipChat. HipChat was
Oh yeah,
around for a
HipChat. Yeah.
while.
Yeah.
And I remember as a startup, we were tinkering with all these tools, like what's the best collaboration thing? And Slack was sort of out there in the mix. And I was like, hey, like anybody can join this. I'll just write a blog post and be like, if anybody wants to talk about marketing ops, I'm alone. Like, come help me. and that's where it started. I had this like technical background, fell in love with marketing operations and business, started a community because I was a team of one, And eventually it sort of grew from there. So that I promise is like one of the shortest versions of that. I'm clearly I talk way too long.
Yeah, it's sort of condensed. What is it, like 18 years into like a minute or
Yeah.
2 minutes? That's really
Yeah.
good.
Like how do I pack that down?
Yeah, and if you look at, I mean, marketing ops. I know we talk about marketing ops and also creative ops on this sort of show podcast. I mean, how do you see it being different or similar, and how they sort of interrelated, and how did they work together?
First of all, I don't think like just right out of the gate, like they don't work together enough. They should. I think that the nature of being a marketing professional today and a creative professional today is such that obviously you want to work as efficiently as possible. Creative does take, time, right, to create something good and worth putting
Yeah,
into the market. But there are efficiency gains that you can get from technology that makes it a challenge, right? And those are that's like right there is the similar sort of overlap right away, is that you suddenly have to go from sort of being an expert in your field in a particular area, right? Like I'm a really good graphic designer, I'm a really good video production or podcast producer or whatever, and you have to figure out, well, now how do I leverage technology to sort of accelerate my ability to deliver quality work?
yeah,
And the same is true in marketing, right? Marketing
yeah.
operations professionals, more often than not, you sort of fall into the role. You're interacting with databases and
It's sort of a
software.
multi-hat thing. If you're in marketing, you're sort of always going to have some ops
Yeah,
as part of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And there's aspects of almost every marketing role, I would argue, that are basically somewhat
Mm.
operationally oriented. But the marketing operations professionals, at least the ones that I think, one are most passionate about the role, and two are probably most successful in their careers, they sort of fall into the category of being like a mile wide and an inch deep across like go to market
Yeah.
operations, right? And I think that I'm not a creative person nor a creative operations professional, but I do think that that's fairly true of that type of profession as well, right? Like you need to
Yeah.
broadly understand how to deliver those products and the process that happens there to be able to enable folks to move more effectively. And so I think that's the most significant overlap between those two. And at the end of the day, if you're in creative operations and you have a marketing operations professional that you could work with, I would highly encourage you to start doing so, because there's a lot you can teach the marketing ops professional. I'm less concerned about them teaching you something and more concerned about them learning from you, because they're like, oh, this is how this all comes
Interesting.
together, right? This is how we
Yeah.
take that image that we like need to put on the blog and get that going. Like, yeah, I highly recommend it.
In the marketing ops community, you've spoken about these different frameworks, and I know you mentioned like there's a 4-letter framework and there's the spaces framework. What is that? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. When I mentioned at sort of the top of this during my background, I got a start at MavenLink as a marketing operations manager and an event manager, demand gen side. I was asked to come back eventually to help them build their first customer community and advisory board program. And lo and behold, there's a community for community builders known as CMX, which is now owned by a software company known as Bevy. But at the time, I went, head first, like deep end, figure out what is building community all about. What I found is that it's not too dissimilar from building product, right? Whether it's physical goods or
Okay.
software, kind of doesn't really matter. And the reason for that is, at the end of the day, you're just trying to deliver on sort of a promise, a hunch, and a value prop that you have to get market validation from, right? And so, you imagine for a moment you're building your very first go-to-market product of whatever it is or feature set, and you're like, hey, I believe I have this hypothesis that this is the type of thing that somebody wants to see. I now need to interview people, right? User research to understand, is that right? Am I wrong? Where am I missing the mark? What could I do better? And the same is true for building community. And so along those lines, there's a framework known as SPACES. It's an acronym. It stands for the types of communities that you could build. In short, it's the support type of community, product type of community, where like, you're sort of gathering feature requests and voting and those kinds of things. Acquisition You name it, you know exactly what that's about, right? Contribution, so just like getting people to contribute content code, like think of
Yeah,
all the
probably a
code
lot of these
sharing.
sort of engineering based
Right, yeah.
communities. Yeah,
GitHub, right? Like
yeah.
great community around there. Engagement, so just like improving on your loyalty and your retention, and then the S is for success, and so like retention, enablement, and sort of net renewal. I would argue that the two S's sort of feel very similar to each other, but they are distinctly different. The reason for that type of a framework is you need to understand, what does success look like, right? Like as an organization, everybody's going to have, just like everybody thinks they're a marketer, everybody's going to have an opinion on, oh, the community is meant to bring in new dollars or whatever, right?
What was the target for Maven Link when they said go build this community? What was the goal for them?
Well, that's a good question.
Okay.
I will say that not everybody at the leadership level was quite ready to like put a stake in the ground and be like, oh
Okay.
yeah, like this is what it's for. So
Yeah.
eventually, like I kind of guided them to, hey, I think it's really about the support and success side of things, which did sort of happen because I was rolling into the customer success organization on my second go
Okay.
around. So I wasn't in marketing. One thing I am pretty steadfast on is, I guess it's sort of like two pieces, but it's like be very intentional about the community building aspect of your organization. And by
Okay.
that,
What
I
does that mean?
mean,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Okay.
by that, I mean, your brand can lean in on it fully and own it. And that's okay, right? It can be a community for Maven Link's customers. And it's very Maven Link branded and very much like by Maven Link, right? Like very tied close to the brand. You can also do the other version of that, which is there's just a community and it's a part of us, but you
Mm.
don't really get the sense that it's like this brand
Yeah, yeah.
specifically,
That
right?
makes sense. But like
But
marketing ops, it's like a business would start marketingops.com, for example. Yeah.
yes, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And fun fact, it actually was once being run
Okay.
by a business. That's a different story, but yeah. So like just being intentional about that orientation of how much does your brand presence exist in your community, and that does give you different levers to pull on, right? Like if it is super intentionally overlapped, there's going to be a more natural space for you to bring in, say, your implementation partners or your best customers or whatever, to sort of like thread that line as delicately as you can to generate net new business for your organization, without being sort of like obtuse and over the top about it. The other version, like, don't do that. Right? Like you got to get really creative to find ways to tie it back to the brand, and then you have to be okay with it, right? And
That
so
makes
that was
sense.
kind of, the
Yeah.
intentionality is super important.
Let's imagine Ziflow doesn't have a community. We just don't have a community in that sense. We have an ideas board. We have our quarterly product webinars, and a bunch of customers join. And it's often the same. You see the same names, and we sort of get to know these 200-300 sort of like top users. But if we wanted to build a community, I mean, what would you come and do? Would you suggest like you build a user community, or is it a community that's adjacent? Because I think, one of the things every business struggles with is awareness. We will have, you have a product, you have a mini brand. It's just super hard to get the word out there like, hey, here's a solution for a problem that you might not even know you had. But apart from that, I mean, it almost feels like just instinctively you'll get dragged into creating a community that will create awareness for the company. But is that the right way to do it, or is it better to build a user community?
The answer is you're right.
Yeah.
Both.
It's both. Yeah.
I've been brought in a few times to organizations to try to work through that problem. I will say that we'd probably have to unpack even more, but what I hear is from you just now is that, brand awareness and reach is super important. And the ability to sort of generate net new eyeballs is really important. and you might have like pretty solid product market fit at this point, and you have enough relationships to understand what value prop needs to be built into the product, and they're going to give you feedback anyway. And so, right now your pendulum's sort of swinging the direction of, okay, well, let's steer clear of maybe the product oriented community and start looking more at the acquisition type of community, um, to try to drive more engagement and brand awareness, right? And it doesn't mean you can't have sort of like both aspects, but from one CEO to another, like it is important to like measure the success and the investment and actually invest. So community shouldn't be an afterthought. Is the other piece of it. So you don't want to run both in tandem if you can't support both in tandem with the right resources.
How much time does it take? I mean, because you feel like, okay, maybe there's a SaaS tool out there that I can buy to host my community, and then I start like trying to build it, content, keep them interested, engaged. But what's actually behind it? It must be much harder, or, takes a little bit more time than that.
Yeah. It's incredibly difficult. You should have a passion for it, or just at least hire for someone that has a passion for bringing people together. And there's many folks out there that do have that passion. Sort of when you think about digital asset management and taxonomies, right? It's that same level of thinking, right? Like, how do I need to organize and all of this space on a forum or in Slack or whatever, to help people orient, like, where am I, what value do I need out of this place, how do I engage with this environment? So like, what are the topic categories, what are the personas, are there different environments for different types of folks? When we went through the, like, to use some like statistics terms, the combination permutation problem of, okay, there's lots of different ways to slice this pie to build a community. Is it enterprise focused, mid-market, whatever? Is it verticalized? Is it by role? It changes like the intention of the community and who you're speaking to. And ultimately it ends up being kind of like an ICP.
Yeah, it's like running a business.
Exercise.
It's like building a product, as you said.
It is literally no different.
I never thought about it that way.
Like, it feels like it's just there. Oh, like we serve creative operations people, therefore whatever. It's like, well, hang on a second. Are you trying to sell upmarket? Who specifically are you trying to sell to? What types of verticals? Are they US? Are they European? Do we need, like,
brands versus agencies, different creative
like
ops,
all of it, they have different problems, right?
Yeah.
Like, their scale challenges are totally different, and therefore our topic categories need to be oriented around it, right? It just changes everything. So there's a lot of work that goes into it. I would argue that somebody should be leading the helm the same way that you would have somebody sort of leading a product, and thinking that at that strategic level. And then you need to have a couple layers below them to do the enablement piece, right? Like, how do I activate and engage and ask the right questions and, reward people for their behavior, like that kind of stuff.
And also, I mean, you need a community to make it feel like a community. I mean, there's obviously a starting point, where there's zero, and
just
email
like
your
business,
friends,
right?
join. Yeah. But at what point does it start to feel like a real community where, do you still answer a lot of the sort of the questions that come up, or is it the community? At what point do they start taking over?
That's a really good question. For us, I would say the inflection point was probably around 500 members.
It's more than I thought.
Yeah.
But I mean, everyone's not on it all the time, so that probably makes sense.
Yeah, and then like there's some really good metrics. If you were to go to for your listeners and anybody else who's watching or listening to this, assuming the research is still out there, by Fever BEE, like a bumblebee, there's some pretty good statistics and research around like the sort of benchmarks of engagement, and those benchmarks will kind of give you that signal, right? So like, if you expect, let's say, 2 to 3% of your community to be active at any given time, you sort of need a pretty decent number of people in order for it to sort of like be in a place where it's more self-sustaining. And so it takes a little while.
It takes a few hundred. I'll get those numbers now. As part of your community, you do this, I assume it's annual research, the marketing ops report, is that correct?
Yeah, we do.
Yeah, I was looking through that, and it's really interesting. I'm an engineer by background, so I always went. I did like a search for, okay, let's look at Agile. How many people are using Agile? And it seemed like 50% in their processes, and I looked at a few other bits. But I mean, do you just want to tell us a little bit about what are some of the key takeouts from that report?
Yeah. First I'll share why I think the research is important. Um, the ultimate goal of the State of the MoPro research, it's this annual sort of benchmark study. Um, it's quite robust. It ends up being like 60 plus pages every year, which I didn't expect when we first built it. Um, Ultimately, it's to educate the market, top and tail, right? And so at the top, it's what is this role? How are they measured? How many people are on a team? Who do they report to? What are their pay scales? What are their pain points? Where are they investing, divesting on technology side of things? And then on the sort of the entry market, or the mid-stage career side of things, all of those same sort of questions are super helpful to them, right? Where it's like, am I getting paid enough? Do I have enough people on my team? What are my peers thinking about doing next? We ask those questions, right? Are they going to go independent? Are they going to lead a team? Like, what's the general sort of pulse on my peers?
I like the team sizes. I know it's like a small thing, but just knowing like the team sizes that respond to it, because you always feel like, oh, I'm a small team maybe, but small teams are doing a lot of work.
Yeah. And I'd say that lends itself to one of the sort of key insights that we try to like pull out for people who are the practitioners, is to say like, hey, am I resourced enough? Do I look like everybody else or not? And then we encourage our members of our community to say, hey, use this research to go ask for budget, or to show that you're doing a great job, or whatever version of that you need to sort of cut off of the research. And I'd say that those are the key takeaways that are the most interesting. It's really about like, how am I being measured, right, as a professional in this field, and then generally is my team sort of doing the right things based on the market and what they're thinking about doing right now too. You're constantly putting out fires in marketing operations, and to have a moment to step back and go, is this right?
Yeah.
is a valuable resource, I think.
Yeah, I think these benchmark reports are always so useful, and it's just like, it helps educate different teams, because you're always in your silo, you're working, and you don't necessarily know what other people are doing, or what are the latest trends. But you're just on that topic. I mean, if you had one of the biggest things you think operations people are missing today when it comes to process, what is it? And if it's not process, what else is it? But yeah, do you have any thing that you can that sort of come out of this report, or your experience?
So my shtick, as you'll find if you sort of go perusing through some of my content here and there, is I think that marketing operations professionals are actually just product managers, and ultimately their product is just made up of lots of different go-to-market solutions. And the thing that the market is missing, like people in this role aren't necessarily missing it because they haven't been told or taught to think this way, and I'm hoping that we can change that as a community. But ultimately the market is missing the opportunity to go, oh, I need somebody to lead my go to market tech stack. I need somebody who understands, kind of like to the degree that I was talking about building a community, I need
Yeah.
somebody to be able to think about my go to market tech stack in that same way. And I think that's what's missing for marketing operations professionals today, is those that have fallen in love with this career, right? There's a strategic layer that can be added on to this that starts to meet the people at the board level, right? The C level, the seat at the table proverbially.
Yeah, yeah.
um and that is a tremendous opportunity to make a very strategic impact on an organization. But we're still a little ways away from educating the market on,
Yeah.
like, hey, they're not just a Marketo expert or a HubSpot expert or whatever, right? Like, there's so much more here. Let me help you bring your great idea to the market in whatever motion you're talking about, right? That mile wide and an inch deep that I was
Yeah.
talking about. I have to understand ABM and SEO and SEM and all those like capabilities, the inbound model, the outbound model. I have to understand fundamentally how those work. and then I'm going to help you deploy a product, a go-to-market product, to help you bring your product to market.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's gone really hard for, or that is still very difficult for marketing teams, is that if you think about teams building software products, so we've got dedicated backend engineers, dedicated front end engineers, dedicated DevOps, dedicated QA, dedicated product managers. You have like all these experts in the various areas putting this product together and then obviously bringing it to production and so on. The thing I find in marketing that is challenging is sort of a couple of things. One, you can't necessarily always afford, if you're smaller, you're not like a mega organization, you can't afford to have experts in every area. So as you said, someone's got to be, you know, they've got to be a master of everything. Can't just be a jack of all. It's literally got to master everything in marketing. And then secondly is the feedback loop. We run product analytics and we know exactly where people are clicking and how many clicks, and okay, let's optimize that click and so on. When you put up marketing content, and as you said, you need so much time up front to get the best creative, tell the story. But sometimes that feedback loop is just like, well, how did they find out about us? They just like typed in our brand name in Google and then they came to us. Or how did they become? That is, I find that really challenging in the marketing space. Yeah, I'm not sure how we'll
Yeah,
resolve it, but yeah, it's challenging.
I agree. And I think just kind of going back to a session I had on another podcast related to creative operations, in fact, I think that that's actually a kind of a unique strategic opportunity for the creative ops professionals. The reason for all of those sort of bespoke custom roles, right, that we were just talking about, like those roles that exist for great intention and purpose, is that they have something to measure, right? Like they have a job to be done. I'm not saying creative ops professionals don't have a job to be done, but what I am saying is there might be some additional components that they could operationalize that give us the opportunity to lean on them and say, hey, are you going to be the one measuring the outcome of this hypothesis, right? And by that I mean, okay, hey, I want to work hand in hand. I'm just going to like use a rudimentary example. I'm creating some digital assets that are maybe like graphics, right? And I want to work hand in hand with my demand gen go to market team to say, hey, like, what are the audiences you're trying to target? What are their emotions and the pain points and all that stuff, so I could build a great on brand sort of digital asset. And at the end of this experiment window that we have, let's all agree is going to be, I don't know, 8 weeks because we have enough traffic to our website. I'm going to be the one on the creative ops side to measure the sort of like success rate of which asset sort of generated the most result. And maybe the result is a click through, maybe it's a registration or whatever. Obviously it's not just that one specific thing, because it doesn't have to be like a display ad that we're talking about here. But the fact that you can take ownership of that conversation and drive that alignment and say, hey, I would love to enable this kind of stuff, and here's a couple of resources, assets that I think we could test. Do you all want to do this? And then you own the outcome, right? Like, I want to measure it and report back to you. You don't need to be an analytics expert. You just need to be the one that says, oh yeah, it's my job, it's my turn now to tell you what happened.
Yeah, do you think they'll do that? I find like generally they like look at how to scale creative and their creative output. It feels like, yeah, there's always a gap, and that's where we spoke about it, between the creative ops and then marketing. Is sort of like this gap between them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's an opportunity to. I don't know that they necessarily will lean all the way in on it, but
Mm.
I do think that, um, to your point earlier, like what I was hearing sort of between the lines is like, you're a mile wide, you're an inch deep. You kind of have to be a master of all these things, and there's a lot of noise, and you don't totally know all of the things that are happening. And frankly, it's hard to keep track of. And it's like, well, if somebody else has the interest in supporting that, I can guarantee it would be very well received if somebody on the creative side was like, well, tell me what the outcome. In fact, you know what? I'll just be a part of measuring that outcome, because I want to, help have a successful organization in this go-to-market motion.
Yeah, it's trying to helps what the next creative should be, etc., or the next campaign. Um,
Yeah.
Is there anything you find brands sort of get wrong, when they are working on specific campaigns, or is there anything they can do better, you find, like, in the sort of markups, creative ops world?
Yeah, I think it's like that last mile problem is always the hardest one. It's going to sound like I'm just sort of perpetually tooting the horn of like the importance of marketing's sort of back end, back office, but for the sake of saying it, I've been at like pretty small organizations throughout my career, and so I felt probably very different pain points than what enterprise feels. And one of those is I was the person implementing the graphics and the copy onto a campaign, and I'm literally the last stop before we hit send, and I'm reading it going, none of this makes sense. Right? Like why is this copy here? Like none of this is pairing together correctly based on the audience you told me you wanted to message and what I know about them. None of this is right. And so I think it's that, like, how do we begin with the end in mind
Yeah.
that needs to happen more? And that's probably the most common thing that happens.
Yeah, I think the sort of the trap most of us fall into, and I've spoken about this before, is internally you get bored about using the same message, talking about the same thing over and over. And if you think about it on the flip side, there are just millions of people out there who just never heard of you, never consumed any of your content. So if you're saying the same thing 1,000 times, it's going to be the first time they read it, and it's going to be the same. It's going to be the thing you need to say. It's just figuring
Yeah.
out that one thing, the one key message you need to get through. I think it's not everything, but I think, like, just keep the consistency, refine that. But yeah,
I totally agree. This overlap between sort of like creative brand and marketing. Um, we always like we have this perpetual desire to like constantly innovate, right? And um, it's really interesting in go to market. Like you can slow down to speed up, and you can have like longer time horizons for the most part with your sort of messaging to see if it works.
so on that point, we've reduced the amount of LinkedIn social posts we do through our company branded account, and our engagements have actually gone up. Our follow accounts have gone up. We're not sure exactly why, but we just post a lot less content. So in terms of, LinkedIn shows you your 5 top competitors, and how many posts you do. We do the fewest amount of posts, but we're usually number 1 or 2 on new follows and engagements, which is more important. So it is weird. It's just like we feel like we've got to generate more content to just be out there, and we've got, like, we see competitors just posting every day, but maybe it's just too much sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of noise in the market, right?
Yeah.
And I think if you lean in on sort of like the quality of your content, right, that's important. But to your point before, I fall into the same trap all the time, and that is I feel like we have to come up with a new offer, a new
Yeah.
message, right? Like, how do we position the community? And for us, it's that there's a community. Like
Yeah.
it's that
Yeah.
simple,
Come join us.
right?
It's cool. Yeah.
Like it's
Exactly.
a great place. You don't have to be alone. And like that's the through line. I don't need to talk
Yeah.
about access to all of the recorded content or a virtual ticket to our conference is included.
Mm.
I mean, those are great perks to being a paid member and all that stuff. But really the through line is you don't want to be alone. Right. And we just have to lean in on that.
Yeah. It's getting into the emotional piece. It's like, yeah, especially for the community, it's like, yeah, don't be alone. There's other people like you here dealing with the similar challenges and, things that you have to deal with. So yeah, I think that's spot on. But it is so tempting to just, like, okay, is there a silver bullet? Is there something else I could do? Just like, whoa, okay, this is like magic.
Yeah, I agree. And and the needs of the business, change over time. I didn't say any of this before, but like none of what we have today was planned. I didn't like say, "Oh, I'm going to go build a business around marketing operations as a vocation." When it was like what probably 5 years ago, like community led was like all the rage. Like that
It was
was
huge.
everybody
Yeah,
was
it was like,
yeah,
this is the
it was like
thing.
the buzz thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. we were really in our growth phase at that point, and we actually mean it when we say community led. All of this unplanned stuff that is now in fruition, like it's come to fruition, is because everybody asked for it. They were like, "Hey, you should host a conference," and we're like, "Oh, okay. I guess I'll figure out how to do that too."
Do
Right.
that, yeah.
And so it's just listening and putting the content out there and watching for feedback. Like those are the ways in which, your businesses can grow, and then eventually the business needs change, right? As I was saying, and today, we need membership to be our through line, to sustain an organization that can support growing vocational practice area. All we want to do is reinvest back into them, and we don't really want it to be just on the sort of what I refer to as the hamster wheel of sponsorship.
Yeah.
And so, we're going to find ways to innovate and bring more value to people, to make sure we can give back.
Yeah. And so in terms of marketing ops and the community, what are the most important things, or what are the things you think you can educate the community most on? Well, what are the sort of the biggest gaps? So, marketing automation, okay, check. You've got a HubSpot, people have used Marketo, whatever. Everyone's got something. But what else is there? I mean, there must be something that, can really benefit this group.
I'm on the path, I should say. We,
Yeah.
not me, we are on the path of effectively creating a certification program that is tech agnostic. And really, I think the way that you could start thinking of marketingops.com in hopefully the near future is kind of like the PMI of the PMP certification,
Yep.
right? So Project Management Institute, PMP, Project Management, Certified Project Management Professional. It's a lot of words to try to say all at once.
Lots of project management in there.
Yeah. So, but for the sake of sort of thinking of marketingops.com in the future state and what the organization and members can learn, it's aspects of broader sort of strategic alignment between an organization's teams. Our certification is going to lean in a little more heavily on, you need to know the sort of general practices of go to market, like motions in the market. But you need to now learn what it means to be a product manager and how to build a backlog and do user research and interviews and write user stories and all those kinds of things. You then need to learn something a little bit more on the sort of technical side, which you probably would have picked up already with a couple of years of experience. And that's really like, what is object orientation and database structure all about? Like, what is a key value, right? And how do I understand sort of a relationship between databases? And that's really important to just understand how technology works, right? And the last piece that I would say is important is just generally understanding some level of finance, right? I don't need you to be able to balance books, but I think if we say revenue recognition, you should at a minimum know like what the two sort of models are, right? Like, is it sort of cash? Is it accrual? Right? Like, how does our business measure success? And those things, as you go to pick up those skills, allow you to have a much more strategic and, for lack of a better term, intelligent conversation with your leadership organization.
Yeah.
It says like, hey, I kind of understand how you're thinking about a lot of this stuff. So, here's how I can help.
That's brilliant. So in 5 years, let's fast forward a little bit. What is your Nostradamus like take on where they're gonna be?
Oh gosh, in 5 years, I hope that we have established a well-respected certification program that allows someone at the leadership level to know exactly who to turn to when they are asked the question, who's in charge of building your go-to-market tech stack of the future? Right? Like, how are you going to continuously go to market and innovate? Because modern sales and marketing doesn't happen without technology. And so who's responsible for that? And they're going to know that it's going to be people that came out of this marketing ops background. Because frankly, it's not the CTO, it's not the CIO's job. Someone needs to be able to translate sort of the language of the business to the capabilities of the technology landscape and bring that stuff together in technology. And so my hope is that in 5 years, people know that answer.
And I wanted to ask you, I mean, obviously AI is a big thing now. How's it sort of impacting or benefiting the community? Um, how are you looking at incorporating or using that? And how do you think that's going to affect marketing ops?
Yeah, good question. I was surprised if we weren't going to touch on AI today.
Yeah, I had to. I
Not that
had
I'm like
to.
yeah, not that I'm a
Well, actually,
prolific AI person, but
so it's quite funny because our engineering team, I follow our AI channel on Slack, and it's all the MCP protocol and so on. And well, one of our engineers slacked me late last night. He's like, "Hey, we have to get the marketing team, MCP and so on." I'm like, "Okay, you'll have to create a presentation to tell the marketing team what do you mean, because this is just like very
yeah.
like." I'm not sure. So yeah.
Yeah. You definitely need to educate everybody on that stuff.
Yeah.
Gosh, the impact of AI on, uh, let's just stay focused on the marketing ops category. I think is just a great enabler, frankly. And here's why. I'll try to illustrate it in like maybe two examples. The first one, I'll abstract away from marketing operations for a moment. Everybody's like, yeah, we could just implement AI BDRs and SDRs, right? It's like, yeah, go for it. Like, there's a lot that could happen there. That is only going to be as good as the data that is coming in, and guess who you have to turn to be able to get the right sort of data, right? So we'll set that aside for a moment, but let's pretend that that all is working great. You've got the right inputs coming in. At some point, there will be a change. And an organization will go, oh, I didn't have to put bodies in seats to be able to generate sales. Like this AI, SDR, BDR thing, that's the future. It's like, okay, but what does good look like? And how do you know what good looks like? And who's going to be responsible for measuring what good looks like? Because at some point, all the people who have done the AI, SDR, BDR job, they're going to have moved on. They're going to have moved into a leadership role. They knew what success looked like before. They know how
Yeah.
to manage these things. And eventually they'll move on because they don't want to do that anymore. They don't want to manage the AI bots. And now who's responsible for it? How do they learn what success looks like? Because now you don't have anybody who's ever done the job to teach these things anything, right? Or to try to figure out how to innovate on it. And so I think that sort of illustrates the point that like you can't just get rid of people who actually do some of this work
Yeah.
because
It just
they
yeah.
they have to learn what good looks
Yeah.
like, right, in order to manage something at scale. So we can kind of tie that right back to marketing operations, right? The same is true. I don't think AI is coming for our jobs quite as fast as maybe some others. Um, but in terms of being a great enabler, if I fundamentally understand how technology works and understand what the capabilities are of these platforms, I understand what the go to market motions are that an organization needs, I can leverage AI to allow me to go faster to implement those things because I know the art of the possible when it comes to the technology. But we're still a far cry, I think, from AI coaching us and saying, "Hey, tell me about what you're trying to do here. Let me learn about like what are you trying to accomplish? Who are you selling to? And all these things." They have to pull that information out of us to be able to then say, "Okay, well, here's sort of the art of the possible as it comes to your current tech stack." And the reality is that like I don't know that AI is really going to get to a place where it's going to be as successful as a human is at getting that information and then using AI to enable it, right, and go to market faster.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to have to move from the artificial more to the intelligence, from the A to the I,
Yeah, definitely.
to get there. And over time, it probably we'll have to see how quick and how it gets there. If you think about, I don't know, 100, 200 years ago, people were just doing a lot of work. I mean, either you're farming all day, or you're just like in some mill or whatever, and you're
Yeah.
spinning like 10, 12, 14 hours a day. Your 7-year-olds there helping you fix the spindle, it's like stuff like that.
Yep.
And now people we actually have a lot more downtime, just because of how things have moved on and so on. We're producing more, but also we'll work pretty hard. But I think if you had to take like most of the modern society, or and you compare it to like 200 years ago, people just have a lot more time to do things. And I think maybe AI, we like getting docs ready for our board meeting and so on. And, you used to have to write that all by hand. And now you can say, okay, here's my prompt. You have to still prompt it correctly with all the data and the ideas and like work through it. But I mean, it just produces something so much better and so much quicker, that if you had to write, it would take months maybe, and now you're doing it like in a week or 2 weeks. And that's like, okay, now I can go do other stuff. So I'm not, yeah, I don't know if it's just going to take over things. And so maybe it just gives us more time to do what you want to do.
Yeah. I think it does give us more time. I agree with you. I think the word of caution for all of humanity is that, like, let's not lean further into being lazy, right? Just because that it can be there. And it actually creates this really interesting, I think we're all feeling it right now, but it creates this really interesting challenge where it feels like it should be really easy to go to market, right? Because of exactly what you're talking about, right? If I've got the right prompt engineering happening and I've got the right inputs, I can make something happen pretty quickly. But the work that goes into establishing that baseline, that
Yeah.
data foundation, it's a lot of work,
It's still a lot
actually.
of work, and it's still difficult. Yeah. It's,
And
it's
it
not just
needs
like prompting and there you go. Yeah,
yeah, it
totally.
needs maintenance. And like, you look at organizations like Clay, for example, that like are making a ton of noise
Mm.
in the space around all of this sort of enrichment and go to market motions. And I think they wrote a piece on go to market alpha. I would argue that that's sort of the like slow down to speed up thing that
Yeah.
everybody needs to go back to, which ironically isn't any different than like where we were 20 or
Yeah.
30 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. I was going to say that. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just that like we now have better
It was sort of
tools to
figure out
capture
and
it.
learn how to use this
Yeah.
efficiently. Yeah.
And I'm hopeful that the change that we saw in the landscape with marketing automation circa 15-20 years ago was um the learning experience we all had to go through, right? Like, it back then it was like, yeah, you buy this you buy this tool and leads will just start flowing.
Just email
uh,
everybody. Yeah.
yeah, and it
Yeah.
just felt like a magic button, right? Like a
Yeah.
magic switch. And I think we've learned that it isn't that, but it's weird. We're sort of like seeing the same behavior because everybody's like, oh, but AI makes it so easy. It's like, no.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work that needs to go into using this right. It's the same problem as marketing automation. Like, it doesn't just work.
Yeah. It's still telling the story, convincing people that hasn't gone away.
Identify your personas, understand their pain points, talk to them, and
Yeah.
then figure
Yeah.
out what to go build for them, right? Whether it's a
Yeah.
product or a campaign, I don't care.
That's brilliant. Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today. Good luck with building this community. I think it's awesome. And as I said, if you're not on the marketing ops community yet, please join today. And yeah, we look forward to seeing what you are coming up with next, Mike.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me. And yeah, go check us out, marketingops.com. And I'm on LinkedIn, so reach out anytime. I'm open to a chat.
Brilliant. Thanks. I'm sharing insights from around the marketing, tech, and operations industries on how marketing and creative teams can get more done together.